Welcome to Fresh Catholic, a podcast for those who are converting, reverting, or simply want a fresh perspective of the Catholic faith to help them to open their hearts and minds to become closer to the love and goodness of Christ. My daily prayer is that I will be a bright light to others, to be filled with the love and light of Christ, so that when people look at me, they see Him radiating out from me for His glory. Hello and welcome. I'm Lori Balderas, and I'm so happy you're here. So today we're going to do things a little bit differently than we normally do because I have my first guest, which is Deacon Don Huntley. Yay, I'm so excited. Deacon Don is very important in my life. He was not only my RCIA teacher when I converted to Catholicism, but he also was the officiant in the wedding of my husband and I in 2015. And now Deacon Don and I work together at Our Lady of the Assumption Church in Ventura, and I'm the wedding coordinator, and Deacon Don runs the marriage prep program, amongst other things he does. And I would say Deacon Don does about 95% of the weddings that we do at our church. So we work together a lot. We do a lot of weddings. I love that ministry, and I think Deacon Don does as well. So thank you, Deacon Don, for coming today. I'm so honored that you're here. I'm just excited to talk to you about the RCIA program. And so thank you for coming.
You are welcome. Lori, I'm honored to be your first guest, and I have listened to each of your segments so far, each of your podcasts. So we'll try to keep the same level of continuity and quality.
Good. Yay. Well, you're a great public speaker, so I'm not worried at all. What I wanted to do today was talk to you about the RCIA program, because that's the time of year we're in right now where people will be coming into the church. It's a very exciting time. I mean, anytime the RCIA program is to begin in the summertime, it immediately makes me go back and remember, when I walked into the church that first time, they announced the RCIA program. I had no idea what that was. I signed up 3 weeks later, met you. I mean, that's obviously where I met you the first time, and then just didn't miss a class. But every time these people every year are going through this program, it just it takes me back. I get real emotional when I see them come in, and I know what they're going through, and I know that you're taking really good care of them, and I'm just excited for them. I'm hoping that first thing you can do is kind of explain what the RCIA program is, just define it for people who maybe don't know what it is.
Let me start by saying I remember that first time that you came to the first RCIA gathering, both you and Simon, and you always sat in the front of the room, the eager beaver that you are, and you soaked everything in, and you made it clear gently that, you're not sure you're going to go through the sacraments thing, but you really wanted to learn what's this Catholic thing all about. And I remember at a certain point in time where everything clicked for you, and you said, it's not just me understanding with my head, it's in my heart now. And I know why I'm here, and I know I want to receive sacraments.
Aww.
So I clearly remember that. So your question, what is RCIA about? Well, RCIA is an attempt, a successful attempt by the church to recapture the way that adults were originally brought into the church. And I mean originally, the early church, right after Christ, as the church began to become more than just the disciples passing on their experience with Christ, as it became a way of life. And by the way, it was called the way before it was called anything else, because it was the way to follow Christ, the way to be fulfilled. All right. And so most of the people coming to the church were adults, and then they'd bring their families with them. So you would have adults that would be baptized, immediately confirmed, then partake in the Eucharist. The way that adults came to the faith in the early church was a long process, and it could be a year for some people, it could be more than a year for others. But it was an opportunity for them to be immersed in the gospel message, to understand that this is basically being drawn into the life of Christ, having a personal relationship with God, which until God the Father sent his Son wasn't possible. You could have a relationship with God, but not that kind of intimate relationship that we as human beings can have with other human beings.
Right.
When God came as one of us, Jesus, both God and man, now we can have this intimate relationship that wasn't possible before. So relationships take time, right? We all know that. Intimate relationships take a lot of time. And so the judgment was usually the bishop, because bishops were basically like pastors now. They would have a flock, or they would have their church, which was local. And they would be the ones that would take care of these sacraments of initiation, coming into the fullness of life in the church and this personal relationship with Christ through these sacraments. As time went on and history continued and the church evolved, it came to a point in history when, in the Roman Empire, it wasn't only legal now to be Catholic, it was the norm. So everyone was Catholic. Well, when that happens, pretty soon you get to a point where the only ones that aren't Catholic are the babies being born, right? And so things changed. And the way that we brought people in the faith changed. There's a reason why Catholics baptize infants. Other Christian denominations wait until the individual can make the choice. Well, our understanding of baptism, what it means, being transformed into a child of God, from that perspective, we don't wait. We don't want to wait for our children to have that gift. So we baptize them as infants. And then the church makes it clear that the parents and the godparents now have the responsibility to raise them in understanding of the gift so that they can live it. And it makes a difference in their life.
Right.
So fast forward to the 20th century, and things have changed again historically, dramatically. And we have situations where we have a larger number of adults who are now considering coming into the church, whether that's beginning with baptism or maybe they're baptized in another Christian tradition and they're drawn to the Eucharist, they're drawn to the sacrament of confirmation. So the church in 1961 to 65 had this church council called Vatican II, the second council that was held in the city of the Vatican. And the idea was to not change church teaching. That doesn't happen. That's scriptural and that's tradition and that comes from God. But to make sure that we are sharing that with the world in a way that engages the world. And historically, we had kind of circled the wagons after the Protestant Reformation, and we became more of a church concerned with preserving what we are rather than, as Christ says, going out and sharing this good news with the world. And so the challenge for the church was, as Pope John the 23rd said, let's throw open the windows and let some fresh air in, but also allow for us to share with the world this wonderful gift of sacraments that are the tradition of our church. So considering what's the best way now to bring adults into the church, we went back to what was successful at the very beginning. And so that's the RCIA program. It stands for Rite of Christian Initiation of Adults. Now get ready, Lori, because that's going to change next year to OCIA.
Okay.
The church is changing the acronym.
So let's see.
What do you think the O stands for?
I don't know. What?
Order of Christian Initiation of Adults. Okay. A rite is normally a ritual, right? We have all these rites in our church. Well, an order makes more sense because it's this process that takes time. And so it's filled with rites, but it's more accurately described with that acronym.
We'll be right back.
Rising anti-Semitism. New generations redefining how they connect with Jewish traditions. Changing dynamics among Jews around the globe. Take a deep dive into these topics and more on Mosaic, Exploring Jewish Issues, the podcast brought to you by the Jewish Federation of Palm Beach County. Hear from the thought leaders, politicians, scholars, and artists at the forefront of Jewish life today. Subscribe to Mosaic, Exploring Jewish Issues, wherever you listen to podcasts.
Okay. That's nice. One reason I wanted to do the podcast is to kind of just give this, like I say, fresh perspective. It's not just for the people who are considering being Catholic. And I've had people who aren't Catholic at all. They're not interested in becoming Catholic, and they're listening because they're interested in it. So even if it doesn't result in anything, the fact they're interested in what I have to say about what I love so much is encouraging. Then I have people who are coming into the church and they're interested because, obviously they're involved in that right now, and they, probably resonate with some of the things I'm saying. Hopefully, not just based on my podcast, although, I'm hoping that helps. I'm hoping that we're getting to a place where people are interested. I just really think it's a beautiful ministry that you and Diana are doing, and I think you guys are doing such a good job.
I do know that is our intention, that it's not a class. We say this all the time to the team, and when anybody calls it a class, it's like $5 in the jar, right? It's not a class. It's life. It's a life experience.
It is, yeah.
It's being drawn into this relationship with Christ, and by virtue of that, we're being drawn into relationship with each other. Because a very basic belief of the church is we are the body of Christ. Christ, the incarnated Christ, exists in this world through our bodies. That's a very Catholic teaching. St. Teresa of Avila, Christ has no body in this world except yours, has no hand, has no heart, has no mind, has no voice. Christ uses our body to remain incarnated in the world. So if that's the case, then when people come to the faith, it can't be a class. It has to be this authentic experience. It needs to be engaging in a way that it connects them to their life, their lived life.
Right.
That's what makes the difference. So yes, we're committed to that. We're always trying to be better at how we do that too. So we had a paradigm shift in the program 5 years ago. Father Leon and I and Diana decided that RCIA needed to be year-round. Most RCIA programs have the rhythm of a school schedule. So kids are coming back to school in the fall, so we'll begin RCIA in the fall. Naturally, sacraments are received at the Easter Vigil, and then there's this period of time called mystagogia where we explore how to live this gift that we have. But it normally doesn't go, it's the rhythm of the school year, okay?
That's true, yeah.
But that's not people's lives. So I'll get calls in the summer, and we would say, okay, well, we're going to begin in 3 months, so let me take your information, and I'll get you information. And by 3 months, they're not responsive anymore.
Yeah,
they're ready then,
yeah.
And we basically told them, all right, pause, and we'll get back to you.
Pause your excitement.
I went back to the Gospels and I looked at all four, and I never saw Jesus do that once.
Yeah.
Jesus accepted people where they were at and then tried to help them move forward to where they need to be.
Yeah.
And so that means we never have a cutoff date. So we begin in the middle of August usually, and we have people coming in September, October, November, December, and here's the big one. I always get at least a half a dozen right after the new year. So it takes a lot more work. It takes a lot more effort, but we have all kinds of ways of helping people catch up, especially with technology.
Yeah.
We have audio recordings of everything we do that are posted on the website. We have the video interaction and the face sharing that we post on a YouTube channel. And so people who join late, we can have them go back and see that, but it's still not the RCIA experience. Okay, they're not engaged. It's a passive thing. So then it requires for me to meet with small groups periodically and say, okay, you're taking notes as you're doing this. What questions do you have? Mm-hmm. But it's to have the conversations that they didn't have because they weren't in person in a small group, face sharing.
Right.
That's the power of a good RCIA program. Mm-hmm. Face sharing. It's the power of anything that's evangelical.
Yeah.
It's having another conversation with another person who is searching, longing for that meaning in life. Mm-hmm. Talking to another human being and saying, this is my experience, and then listening to the other person. And it has this twofold process. It's if I have to put my faith experience in words in a way that another person can understand, I'm drawn more deeply into that. Mm-hmm. right? And if I listen to other people explain things that are similar or parallel or different in their experience, here's the biggest thing. Wow, I'm not self-deluded. I'm not making this up. This is happening in lives all around me. It's real.
Yeah.
And my favorite thing, and I'm speaking for myself, not just watching other people, is when I'm faith sharing with a group and someone shares an experience and the light bulb goes on in my head and I had a similar experience and I had not yet connected that to, that was God working in my life. And so they made a connection for me I never made. And it makes us more aware of all the ways that God is working in us from the inside out and from the outside in.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's all good. So luckily, when I came for the first visit, the RCIA was starting. Well, the signups were in 3 weeks. So
Oh, you were there from the very beginning.
I hit it, which was good. But I do know that I wanted to really learn a lot about this. I knew it was a lifestyle change. I knew it was something really serious. Like you had said, things take time. It's a very important and serious choice and decision to come into the Catholic Church. So I'm kind of interested for the listener and also myself, because I don't want to say the incorrect things. I want to be factual. I would like to just kind of go through the steps of RCIA, and then I just want to kind of toss in some of my memories of those things.
So the RCIA is segmented, if you will, into 4 stages. So the first stage is a period of inquiry. Second is the period of the catechumenate. The third, purification and enlightenment, and then mystagogia. So those are the 4 stages. So the period of inquiry begins the first time somebody makes contact and says, I'm even thinking about or curious about, or sends me an email, I'm committed to contacting them within 24 hours. If it's about relationship, it should feel that way from the very beginning. Just being available to answer questions for them, get to know them a little bit. No one's the same. Mm-hmm. You're going through the same experience, but no one's the same.
Right.
So knowing your backstory, like you did for your listeners with your first few episodes, helps us as a team understand how to best meet you where you're at. Then we shift into the catechumenate. Now, that comes from a Greek word that basically unbaptized, right? So in the first stage, it's what it sounds like. We're answering people's questions, leading them to understanding some basic truths in a way that connects with their life. They're beginning to understand sacraments and each of the sacraments themselves. So there is some instruction involved, but it's really to answer their questions. When we shift in the catechumenate, that's now formational. And there's a rite or a ritual that transitions from each. So the ritual between the stage of inquiry and now being formed into Christ and being prepared to receive these sacraments is called the rite of acceptance. It's a beautiful, simple rite. And so it happens on a Sunday. They come in and gather in the vestibule of the church. So they're not in the outside world, but they're not in the church yet. And the Mass begins with the procession. And the deacon and the priest go up to the altar, reverence the altar. The priest greets the people. And then all of a sudden, there's knocking on the door.
The knocking at the door.
The door's closed. There's knocking on the door. Now, the deacon goes down, welcomes them on behalf of the church to come in and be a full part of our parish. And the priest then leads them through this ritual with their sponsor. So their sponsor is their spiritual friend who's walking this journey with them. And they're claimed for Christ simply by having the cross traced first on their forehead, then on their ears, on their eyes, on their lips, on their shoulders, on their hands, and on their feet, head to toe. And there's a short prayer with each one of those, why that part is being claimed for Christ. And they know from that point forward, they're members of this parish. And they're warmly welcomed by applause. It's always done at the 11 o'clock Mass at our parish. There are people that come to the 11 o'clock Mass because they want to see this.
That's one of my very favorite ceremonies of the year. it makes me emotional every time I see it. I think it's so beautiful. I love, that they do the sign of the cross on all these parts of the body. I think it's it's such a beautiful ceremony. I know there's been years past where this will be happening and I'll look at you and I'm just you'll look at me like, oh, I know Lori loves this.
And you're not the only one. And let's be honest, the average mass goer, if something else is added to the mass, that means they're getting out later. And they're not always all into that. But this one, I've never heard somebody complain. Yeah. We got out of mass late for this.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
It is.
It is.
And so now we go into the stage of the catechumenate. And this is now being formed in the faith. So what does that mean? Having answered so many questions, having been drawn deeply into the understanding of each sacrament, how is that meant to change me? And what will that look like? Mm-hmm. So if I'm going to live my baptism, I'm going to live the gifts of the Holy Spirit, allow them to live through me from confirmation. If I'm going to allow the nourishment of the Eucharist not just to be for me, but so that when I leave Mass, I share that nourishment with others, what does that look like? So we start diving into Christian morality. So that means there's a very definite way we live and a definite way we don't live.
Right.
That's three weeks right there to really have enough of an opportunity to get a foundation, and then we jump into difficult issues and discuss them. And how have you felt up to this point? What's your understanding of what the church teaches about one issue or another? Why do you think the church teaches that? Mm-hmm. And then if you're struggling with your conscience, that's okay. But remember, the church doesn't teach us to somehow inhibit freedom. The church teaches that this is the way to live so that we're free to be fulfilled.
Mm-hmm. And a lot of people resist that. That's like such a thing of resistance, I feel, this is just how I look at it. If Christ made these rules or these ways of being, everything that God, does is for the good of us and pure love and all these things. And a lot of humans resist that because they want to do whatever they want, whenever they want, in their way. Is that a big make or break time, do you find, where people are either going, okay, I can wrap my mind around this, I agree with this, and I'm going to continue on? Or is that a moment where you see people go?
No, it's not a make or break. Now, I will say, when we inherited the program and before we figured something important out, we just taught what the church taught. Here's your foundation of morality. We didn't spend 2 weeks diving into 3 or 4 really difficult moral issues. And so we basically said, here's what the church teaches, on to the next thing. And people were like, I don't know if I believe in that. Mm-hmm. But when we can actually roll up our sleeves and kind of slosh through the mud a little bit and be challenged to, the church isn't capricious. It's not just saying this to control you.
Right.
There's a reason. What's the reason? What's the why? Now, if you struggle, that's okay. And no one's here to judge you because none of us knows your heart. No one effectively judges you in any way that matters than God, because God knows your heart.
Right.
When we do it that way, people appreciate that, first of all, and it takes the pressure off. Your conscience must be informed, and you can't say, oh, I know better than the church. Oh, know what the church teaches and why. And look how that's developed over time, too, and how many intelligent and holy men and women have helped shape how we take the truth of Scripture and live it authentically in life throughout time, throughout history. You can't just ignore that. That's very important. And you know what? If you don't do what the church teaches, but in your heart you're making what you think is the right choice, even if it's wrong, God appreciates that. That's not a sin. You're not choosing to do something wrong. You're choosing what you think is right. Later on, you may figure out that wasn't the best choice. That wasn't the right choice.
Right.
But your intention was good. And I think a lot of people don't understand that teaching of the church. I can't emphasize enough that you have to have an informed conscience.
I remember specifically those harder topics and things, and I remember thinking that you answered everybody's questions. You didn't dodge it. I just remember you answering the questions, and I thought, wow, he really is knowledgeable about these things, and they made sense to me. explaining why the church thinks this way. And then it would be like, oh, so I distinctly remember those harder moments and things I'd never thought about before, or things I thought I had a reason why I agreed with something. And then I was like, oh, well,
Gotta
this makes sense.
that.
Yeah. So I thought that you have to have an open mind and an open heart for it, certainly.
And we pray for that every evening in RCIA.
Yeah.
Open minds and open hearts. The team first, and then everyone. The spirit of catechumenate, it's one thing to go, okay, how do we live a sacramental life in a way that is authentic? So Christian morality. Then we shift, and this is a shift that in this day and age is really important for the 20-somethings, even more so than others. It's the idea of justice. So it's another thing that's very Catholic, and I'm not judging other denominations of Christianity, but I know this for a fact for Catholic is we can't just be concerned about our own growing in holiness and our own acceptance of the gift of salvation. The way I like to say it is, to be Catholic, it can't just be me and God. Mm-hmm. It has to be we and God.
Right.
Right? So the Catholic tradition is that we support each other growing in holiness. Mm-hmm. And that's the only way to be authentic. Look how Christ gathered 12 apostles, right? And 72 plus disciples. We need to be in support of one another. So with that in mind, now there's a whole idea of justice. I can't just be concerned about living a good moral life myself and watch everything around me go to hell in a handbasket.
Right.
I have to be actively engaged in the world, in the culture, to a degree that I allow the transformative power of God's love to help transform the world and the culture. And so we do an evening where it's a foundation in the history of Catholic social justice. And then it's 2 more evenings where we dig into real difficult social justice issues and get better at realizing that to live a sacramental life, I always have to be willing to be an agent of change. And we make this distinction between charity and justice. We say charity is social service. That's meeting the immediate need. The person who's hungry outside the sandwich shop and saying, hey, I'm going to buy a sandwich. Would you like a sandwich, right? Meeting that immediate need. But understanding that there's a reason why people are hungry. Failures in social structures. Social justice isn't social service. It's social change. Social service is immediate. Change takes time. Transformation takes time, but it's a dedication to always do whatever I can to the best of my ability and resources to help support that change that needs to happen. Mm-hmm. So then that brings us to the period of purification and enlightenment. And there's a ritual between the two. And there's actually 2. So for those who are already baptized, it's called the call to conversion. This normally happens in each parish. And there's a formal presentation of the candidates for confirmation and those who are going to receive the Eucharist to the pastor. Mm-hmm. And so the director of the program says, these people have been with us this long, and Father, they're definitely going to be ready at Easter to receive these sacraments. It's a very simple ceremony, and on behalf of the whole parish, the pastor accepts them, blesses them. Those who are unbaptized go through the rite of election. And this is normally, depending on the size of your diocese or archdiocese, done with the bishop or the archbishop. Mm. He would accept these people preparing for baptism. Now they're no longer the catechumen, the unbaptized. They are the elect. So again, presented by the director of the program, saying, Bishop, Archbishop, they have been studying, they've been learning, they've been living the faith to the best of their ability. Their lives continue to transform. We believe they're ready for baptism at the Easter Vigil. And so the bishop then accepts them. Their names are enrolled in these beautifully bound books each parish has, along with their sponsor, and the bishop goes and signs every book as part of that ceremony. And then there's a dialogue between the bishop or archbishop and those who are the elect, with their sponsor standing behind them and their hand on their shoulder. The sponsors have a dialogue with the bishop as far as their role of support. And it's a very simple ceremony, but things have changed for them now. They're
hugely
called
meaningful.
The elect. Yeah. And that begins the period of purification and enlightenment. So this parallels Lent. It's their first experience of Lent, usually. And Lent is a period of purification, and enlightenment. We had our first evening with that last night, and it was a lot of reflection. There was journaling and writing, and then faith sharing. We didn't do much teaching. We answered some questions, but they'll continue to grow in the faith and understanding, but that's not the purpose of this time. This purpose is to reflect deeply. You're close to receiving sacraments. What does God want to do? What do you need to allow God to do so that you are perfectly open as much as possible, your mind and your heart, to receive this gift so it takes effect.
Right.
And you can live it.
Yeah.
There are 3 rites in the middle of this, 3 Sundays called the scrutiny rites.
Oh, yeah.
And so I was like, the scrutinies, scrutinies. Who's scrutinizing us? No. You're scrutinizing yourself.
Yeah.
You're looking deeply into your heart. And what do you need to let go of to allow yourself to be completely open? Each of these has a beautiful gospel passage about conversion. After hearing these gospels and the deacon or the priest preaching and connecting their lives and the life of the parish, so by going to the scrutiny mass and participating with the elect and the candidates, it's drawing us more deeply into how we're experiencing Lent and into our own baptism, because that's ultimately what Lent is about. Right. We go from ashes to the font. And so that means those who are unbaptized are going to be baptized. And those who are baptized don't get rebaptized, but we recommit ourselves to our baptismal promises. We get sprinkled with holy water after we make that commitment. So if Lent is as it's intended to be, we're at a different place in our commitment to live our baptism. Now we have 50 days of Easter to continue to live this, and that's to lead us into the rest of the year for 9 months.
Yeah.
And we continue to live this. So they're not isolated events. Lent's purpose is Easter. Easter's purpose is for us to recommit ourselves to our baptism and live it in a deeper way. That's the period of purification and enlightenment. Mystagogia. I'll take some liberty, but loosely translated, how to live the mystery of the grace you've received. And so we meet usually till Pentecost. How has that really been something that's substantial for you? How is your life different? What are people recognizing in you? How are you seeing things differently? What are the challenges now that the euphoria, the honeymoon's worn off, right? And to help them, so it's not just, hey, you got sacraments, good luck.
Yeah.
See you around.
Yeah, you graduated, you're done.
Right. And so this is the interesting thing about RCIA. That first period inquiry, 3.5 months. The second period catechumenate, another 3.5 months, maybe 3, depending on the church calendar. Purification, enlightenment, 40, 50 days. Mystagogia, the rest of your life.
Yeah.
The rest of your life is mystagogia, continuing to unwrap that mystery and allowing it to work in and through you.
Beautiful. So I think that we have covered RCIA. I feel really good about it.
What's a good 101?
Yeah.
RCIA
I think
101.
it's important. I think, for people that might be intrigued, I just, kind of wanted an expert to talk about it instead of me bumbling through and saying the incorrect things.
I don't know about expert, but experience.
Experience. So I'm just so happy that you came, and I think this gives people a really good overview of what it is, what it entails. I think that's really good. So
anybody who's interested in just understanding RCIA a little bit better, check out our website at Our Lady of the Assumption Parish in Ventura, and that's olaventura.com. If you go to the menu, the first option is Sacraments. Click on that. Scroll down to RCIA for Adults. There's a short introductory page, and then click for more information. And to the right, there's a button with all of our audio recordings of our gatherings this year. That's free to the public. Anybody can peruse that, check that out. And if anybody has any questions, they can feel free to contact me.
Awesome. I really appreciate you coming today and taking time out to do this. And I think it's been really informative for everybody to hear more about the RCIA. And I just appreciate you so much. And I love you. And thank you.
My pleasure, Lori. I appreciate everything you do. I enjoy working with you regularly. This was a joy. Obviously, it's a passion of mine. So to be able to share that with others, I just thank you for the opportunity.
You are welcome. Thanks for listening today. Next week, I'll share part 2 of this interview, where we will share stories from RCIA and talk about why I think all Catholics should go through this type of experience. Also, please remember to follow me on Facebook, Fresh Catholic, on Instagram, @FreshCatholic. I'm very excited to be doing a speaking event next month, so if you have any Bible study or groups that you would like me to come talk to, I would love to do that. And thank you so much for listening. Thank you. Love you. Bye. Thank you for joining me today. Now go out and be a bright light in someone's life. And remember, be focused, be faithful, and be fresh. Fresh Catholic is recorded at Wonder Mouse Studios at the Castle at Pierpont in Ventura, California. My producer and engineer is Sarah Espel, and she could be yours too. Our podcast studio is available for rent. You can reach us at wondermouse.us or freshcatholic.com.